not Torah's Eretz Yisrael, but nevertheless, I hope the Shir will still be interesting, even though we don't have Avira di Yisrael. I'm in the mountains right now in New York, and today is Shavasa BeTamuz. It's a nidche, but it's still Shavasa BeTamuz. And the topic we will be discussing in this shir is what is the significance, the validity, the chumrah of Dalet TZOMOS Bizman Hazeh. The sugya starts in the Novi Zechariah Perek Ches, when the Novi mentions the 4 fast days in a very positive context. Tzom HaRavi v'Tzom HaChamishi, Tzom HaShvi v'Tzom HaAsiri, Yiyu leBeis Yehuda, leSasoin uleSimcha uleMoyadim Tovim. And the Gemara asks, Korelei Tzom v'Korelei Sasoin v'Simcha, as we see on the screen. And the Gemara responds and answers and explains, V'zman sheyesh shalom yeh l'sasoin v'lesimcha, ein shalom tzom. Or in a different language, Amar Rav Papa, V'zman sheyesh shalom yeh l'sasoin v'lesimcha, yesh gzeres malchus tzom, ein gzeres malchus v'ein shalom, rotzo misanim, rotzo einam misanim. In days of stress, persecution, and tragedy, tzom. In days of shalom, simcha. Bizman she'enoi loy shalom, v'lo shmad, lo gzeres malchus, depends on you. Rotzo misanim, rotzo einam misanim. And then the Gemara asks, Iyocha Tisha B'Av Nama? Does the same refer to Tisha B'Av? Omar Rav Papa Shana Tisha B'Av, Hoyel v'huchpelu bo tzarot. Tisha B'Av is different because Tisha B'Av is a day of utmost tragedy. And when we became aware that we lost 2 Botei Mikdash on Tisha B'Av, not once, but twice, it was clear that this is not coincidence. And therefore, Tisha B'Av is different. That Tisha B'Av does not depend on the Rotzoin. We do not say Rotzo misanim, Rotzo einam misanim. When the Rambam quotes this halacha in Perek Hey of Hilchos Taniyos, and let's have a look at the Rambam. The first halacha is so important because the Rambam teaches us the essence of Dalet TZOMOS. Let's start with halacha Aleph. יש שם יומים שכל יסור מסנם בהם מפני הצרות שאירו בהם, כדי לעורר הלבוב לפתוח בדרכי התשובה. ויהיה זה קורן למעשינו הרום ומעשה אבותינו, שבזה קורן דבורם אלה, נרבה להיטיב בסבד וסבוינו וסבוינו וסבוינו. So the Rambam teaches us, these days of fast, these days of mourning, are not about then, they're about now. Not about the past, but about the present as well. Of course, they are about the past. These are days in which we knew tragedy, days of Churban. But essentially, it's about now. These are to-be days of repentance. Tshuva, Tikkun HaMaasim. Halacha Daled. That's the Posuk Zechariah we started off with. Shavasa BeTamuz, Tisha B'Av, Tzom Gedalia, Sora BeTamuz. V'nagu kol Yisrael bezmanim elu lehis anois. Turn a page. V'nagu kol Yisrael bezmanim elu lehis anois. Ubiyud Gimel Ba'adar. What obviously the Rambam we're using is not Shabsa Frankel.
Recording in progress.
So, Maggid Mishnah on the spot. No, we scroll down, not up. Here we are. Tolo Rabbeinu in Yonon Beminag, לפי שנסבר בגמרא שם, בזמן שיש שלום, לכשיהיה בונה בית המקדש ששון ושמחו. אין שולם ואין גזר ידועה על כל ישראל, רוצו מסענם, רוצו אין מסענם. ויחשוב נהגו הכל להסענויס. ונהגו כל ישראל כמו שכוסה בינו, הרי אין חויבו על כל ישראל, עד שיהיה בונה בית המקדש. So the Maggid Mishnah says, why does the Rambam use the formula nahagu? So let me explain. Let's turn back to the next page. There are two gersos in Rambam. And the Rambam we see on the screen, nahagu kol yesor bezman ameru lesanis u biyud gimel ba'odor. That's the gerus of the Maggid Mishnah. And therefore the Maggid Mishnah understands that nahagu refers not only to Tanas Esther, but also to the previously mentioned TZOMOS. However, in other Rambams, the gerus is Nagu Kol Yisol Bizman Ameru Lesanis Bi Yud Gimel Ba'odor. And according to this gerus, Nagu does not refer to the TZOMOS, only to Tanas Esther. But let's get back to the Maggid Mishnah. According to the Maggid Mishnah, TZOMOS, including Shavuos, BeTamuz, and Tisha B'Av, are a minhag. Does that mean that they're more lenient than they were because they're merely a minhag, and a minhag doesn't have the same chumrah as a halacha? Not necessarily. There are two halachas in which we find kula, leniency, based on the fact that bisman hazeh rotzu mesanim, rotzu ein mesanim. Siman Tov Kuf Samach Zayin, we learn that b'yamei hatzoim one could taste food, and the source is Brochas Yud Alad Amud Aleph, mat emes, tzorech brocha or not. And the Gemara brings that b'yamei hatzoim there is no Isar on te'ima. Shuvas HaRav Shreish Pei Zayin explains why is there no Isar on te'ima? Because we have a Tovkov Samach Zayin. No, that's Tovkov Nun Dalad.
I'm not sure we have some signs. In the meantime, let's go right there. We have Te'ima, yes.
Yes, so there is no Isra on Te'ima.
Pesach, it's there. Please go down to Samach Zayin.
Yeah.
We have the Shulchan Aruch Samach Zayin.
Yeah, we just have...
You have to scroll further downwards. There you go.
That's a machloikes Rashi and Tosfos and the Rambam and Brochas Yudaled. Is te'ima only if you spit it out or even if you swallow. But the Rivash and Siman Reish Pei Zayin explains that the kula of te'ima is because lo kiblu aleim. As we see in the B'Seis of Kosav Arivash B'Tshuva, the Ta'amei Mishem, the Osa Sha'atani Yos Ketanis Yochad Kivin Di Berotzu Misanen Oikmini, and Tanis Yochad Shekibel Olav, Lo Kiblu Al Atzmam Isar Te'ima. Tov Kuf Nun Daled, the din of a Ishu Me'beres, or a Ishu Manika, a pregnant woman, or a nursing woman, P'tura Min Hatzayim, only Tisha above their Chayiv, and the Turazova, Siv Koten Zayin explains, because it is only Rotzu. It depends on the Rotzu, Lo Kiblu Aleim, Lahachmi Be'iborois Umenikois. But would we say that the entire Chumrah of Taniyos is just a minhag? Not really. Let's have a look at the Torah, Siman Tov Kuf Nun. The Torah is fascinating and extremely important. Could we see the Torah in Siman Tov Kuf Nun? Parach b'gemora korelei tzoyim v'korelei soson v'simcho meshaner of popes mandi ike sholem v'leke shmad beis hamikdash kaim sosoin v'zmandi ike shmad v'leke sholem tzoyim v'hu idno the leke sholem v'leke shmad rotzo mesanam rotzo eina mesanam perish the leke sholem shabayis chorev v'leke shmad b'mukim yedia b'Yisrael rotzo roi b'Yisrael v'skimu aleim shaloi le'esanis ein mesanim rotzo rov atzibo misanim. V'u'idno, in our days, rotzu v'nahagor asanis lefichach osa lifras gedo, v'kol sheken b'doiris halalu, sheba ba'avoyno istenu yeshmad ve'in sholem hilkach, hakal chayovam l'asanis v'divre kabbalah, u'mitakones neviim. Various different diukim that we have in the Torah. First of all, the Torah writes, "Ba'avonisenu yeshmad ve'ein sholem." Maybe it's important to note, in the days of the Torah and where we lived, Jews were murdered by the Crusaders. The Torah's wife, his daughter, his brother, who married his daughter. The Torah's brother was also his son-in-law. They were murdered by the Goyim. And the Torah lost 3 members of his immediate family to pogromim, to the Crusaders. His wife, his daughter, his brother, who was his son-in-law. So it should be no wonder that the Torah writes, "Achshav bizmanenu ba'avonosenu yeshmad." But the Torah writes, even when there is no shmad, rotzo. Hilchos hakal chayovam l'asanis medivre kabbalah u'mitakones neviim. And what I want to ask is, the siyum of the Torah, hakal chayovam l'asanis medivre kabbalah v'mitakones neviim, is that only because bizmanenu yeshmad, or it also goes back? Let's scroll to the beginning of this halacha. The siyum hakal chayovan asanas medivre kabbalah u'mitakones neviim. Is that only kol shkem b'doros halalu, or it goes back? Hu idne rotzu v'nahagu lesanois lefichach oso lifras gedar. In my opinion, rotzu goes back to the konas neviim, because it is the neviim that gave us the option. And if we choose to fast, it once again goes back to the chumrah of divrei kabbalah v'takones neviim. It's not that the takones neviim was abolished, it was invalidated. No, the neviim said, "Bizman she'ein lo yishmad v'lo malchom," it's up to you. Rotzu, lo rotzu. And if you choose to fast, it goes back to the takones neviim. What does shalom mean? Rashi writes, "Bezman shalom she'an ein yad ad goyim tkifa oleinu." Maybe we should go back to Rosh Hashanah Yud Ches and see Rashi.
Yes, we'll go back. Go back to the Gemara, please.
So Rashi writes, "Bezman she'yesh shalom she'ein shalom ein yad agoyim tkifa oleinu," and that's somewhat of a pella. So kishe'ein yad agoyim tkifa oleinu. Rashi on the top of the page. Bizman sheyesh shalom she'ein yad oiv dikachovim tkifa l'Yisrael. So there is no tzayim. So what is the situation in America today? Is that yad oiv dikachovim tkifa al Yisrael? We have basic rights like all the others. According to Rashi, there would be an Asar to fast today, because biyad bizman sheyesh shalom ein tzom soson v'simcha. Rashi is a das yochid. Rabbeinu Chananel, Ramban, Ritva, Magid Mishnah, all the others, Their understanding, Bisman Sheyesh Sholem, is Kishabeis HaMikdash Oimid Al Tiloi. Rabbeinu Hananel on the spot. Sholem means we have the Beis Mikdash. Ein Sholem ve'ein Shmad, Rotzu Mesanim, Rotzu Eina Mesanim. Another point I want to make, Rotzu, does that depend on every town, every hamlet, every city, every door, every generation, every year? Who are the ones to decide Rotzu Mesanim, Rotzu Eina Mesanim? My feeling is, depends only on the days of Chazal. If we go back to the Maggid Mishnah, the Maggid Mishnah says, Rotzo, and therefore the tzoim is a chiyuv ad sheyabona beis hamikdash. So the Maggid Mishnah on our screen just a moment ago, here we are. Torah Rabbeinu Inyono. So v'achshov nagu hakoil k'mo shekosav Rabbeinu v'hara en choyvu al kol yisrael ad sheyabona beis hamikdash, which means it's not that every generation has the privilege, every city, no. In my Svorim, primarily in Minchas Osher, Chumash Devorim, Siman Yud, I made a very fundamental argument based on the Gemara in Avodah Zorah Daf Tes, and we find the same Gemara Rosh Hashanah and Sanhedrin, Shit Alfen Shnin Havi Alma. The world in its present form would exist 6,000 years. Alpayim Shnois Teiro, Alpayim Shnois Teiro, Alpayim Shnois Yemoisa Mashiach. The Chazon Ish in the beginning of Iradea deals with the question both the Rambam and the Raspa grapple with. Chai Treifis. Halocha l'Moshe Messinai. But Chazal defined Treifim as a mum in which the animal cannot live more than 12 months. Both the Rambam and the Rashba asks, well, today, we know some treifis could live for many years, and there are some other mumin that doom the animal, it'll die in a very short time, and they're not treifim. The Chazon Ish suggests a very novel svura, a very new svura, and he says, Dina treifis depend on alpayim shnois Torah. So Chazal observed what was the situation at their time, and what they decreed is sealed and fixed till the end of days. And in my opinion, this is not only regarding treifis, but all the fundamentals in halacha. I have an interesting question. Zman kriya shema shel shachris depends on zman kimas hamalachim. And we know it is Gimel choice. The Machlekes Magen Avraham on one hand, the Banatanya and the Gro on the other hand. Do those 3 hours start by the Alois or by the nights? But it is 3 hours. Why don't we make a poll, a survey every 10 years or every 5 years? I would ask all the kings in the world today, when do they get up in the morning? My guess would be they get up much later because kings are not very busy in our days. All they do is go to banquets and parties by night. They don't have much to do in the morning. No. Zman Kriya Shema was determined by Chazal, and that is Lenetzach Nitzochem. It cannot change, will not change. And so many fundamental halachas were determined in those Alpayim Shnois Torah, and I feel the liberty to decide Rotzu Mesanim, Rotzu Ein Mesanim, is for Chazal, not beyond that. I know that what I said right now doesn't fit in one with the Rashba and Megillah Daf Hey, but I think it is not a theater that Rashba says. Even if previous generations decided les anois, a later generation could decide no, lo les anois. Yes, I'm aware of that Rashba, but I think, okay, let's have the Rashba, let's have a look.
This one you're referring to?
So when Rebbe, yes. So when Rebbe decided, when the Gemara says, Bikish Rebbe Lakar Tisha B'Av, So even though, so the Rashba says, explains, Rotzim Sanim, Rotzim Sanim. So previous generations were Misana, but Rebbe thought maybe time has come, Sanis. My argument is yes, but this is only Chazal. Rebbe was a Tana. After Chasimas, a Talmud, it's not shaykh for any later generation to decide we no longer want to fast. So this concept of Alpaim Shnois Torah, we don't have the time to discuss it at length today. Maybe we will have B'siyata D'Shmai B'Ezus Hashem, so many more opportunities. But in my opinion, it is only Chazal that had the liberty to decide Rotzo Misanim, Rotzo Einam Misanim. Today is at Tzoim Nidcha, and in various different areas of Halacha, at Tzoim Nidcha is more lenient. Yesh Lahokal Tfei Mitzoim She'enoi Nidcha, even Tisha B'Av. Regarding Tzoim Gedalia, many people think Tzoim Gedalia is at Tzoim Kal, but it is actually one of the Dalet Tzoimis. Doesn't have the Chumrah of Tisha B'Av, but why would it be different than Shavos BeTamuz and Asar BeTavis? However, this is a machlokes in the great Poskim. Turei Zov Sif Kotten Tov Kuf Mem Tes brings from the Ben Yerucham. Tzoim Gedalia is because Gedalia ben Achika, one of the leaders of Yidden in those ages, he was murdered by his brethren, and that was starting the process of Churban Beis HaMikdash. The Taz brings from Rabbeinu Yerucham, actually he was killed on Rosh Hashanah, but you can't fast on Rosh Hashanah, B'Kesel Yom Chagenu, and therefore the fast is a day after Rosh Hashanah. Eliyahu Rabbah quotes Shalas Tshuvas Rosh Yosef. Tzoim Gedalia always has a din of a nidcha, because actually the Tzoim was supposed to be on Rosh Hashanah. But most poskim, starting over the Taz, the Chidu and Machzik Brocha, and many others say no. There's a difference between a coincidental nidcha and a nidcha be'etzem mitzad ikar takonas hanaviyim. The kula of a nidcha is only when a fast day falls on Shabbos, and it is coincidentally nidcha to Sunday. But Tzoim Gedalia lechatchila they were metaken the day after Rosh Hashanah, and it doesn't make a difference that Gedalia was killed on Rosh Hashanah. That is Ikar Tkonas HaNaviyim, that the fast day is on Gimel Tishrei, and therefore it doesn't have the kula of a Tzoim Nidcha. Sometimes we are makel with Tzoim Gedalia just for the reason that it's so close to Yom Kippur. And some people feel that they will fast on some Gedalia. They will have difficulty fasting in Yom Kippur, and that might be reason enough to be makel. But otherwise, Tzoim Gedalia has the same chumrah as Asar BeTavis and Shavos BeTamuz. Not the same as Tisha B'Av. In many different areas, Tisha B'Av as the chumrah of Yom Kippur. Iboros Emonikois, as we mentioned before, Mesanas HaMashlimois BeTisha B'Av Kishem Shemesanas HaMashlimois B'Yom Kippurim, not the other tzaimis. So as the Gemara says on Rosh Hashanah, as we saw when we started today's year, Tisha B'Av Huchpeloi Tzoros. Huchpelu Bo Tzarot, and therefore we're Machmir Tfei. But Tzoim Gedalia, according to some poskim, has a din of a nidcha, but most poskim, as I explained before, maintain that Tzoim Gedalia has the same din exactly as Shavos BeTamuz and Asar BeTavis. A very common question that I am asked many times, and people go to work and being on the job have extreme difficulty fasting, especially those that are engaged in manual labor. I hear from my friends that lately many men don't fast on Yemei Tzom, and I'm shocked and dismayed. TZOMOS are divrei Kabbalah, the Konas Neviim. What is the basis to be makel? I know that many women don't fast, and that is also a pele b'einai. Nowhere, in no placing do we find the difference between men and women regarding fasting. So the word gedolim that were makel, and their mantra was, well, women are so weak today. Are they so weak today? Are they weaker than they were in the past? Well, so many women do workouts and they do exercise. Why would we assume men are as strong as they were in the past and women are weaker? So the Anka Fisher was a big makel in TZOMOS, one of the Gedolei Yerushalayim. And he used to say a vertel, it was only a joke, that if a Yiddish mama, a Jewish woman, is neither pregnant nor nursing, probably she's ill, and therefore she's memonav shech potem in tzayim. That's a vertel. That's a joke. So in my family, women always fasted just like men, unless there's special circumstances. We adhere to the Shulchan Aruch. Pregnant women do not need to fast. Other TZOMOS, but Tisha B'Av, they do. And if you're not pregnant and you're well and you're healthy and you're doing fine, no difference between man and woman. So, but what is the din if a person must go to work? Is that a basis for leniency? So some Gedolim say, Dalat TZOMOS are about Avelis. And in Hilchos Avelis, we find that if it's a hefsid, then he could work BMA Avelis. No, that's a mistake. Isam halacha BMA Avelis is just one detail, one specific halacha. And it is only Shelo Yasiach Datem and Avelis. But the Dalat TZOMOS are Tekonas Neviim, the Divrei Kabbalah. And these are Isurim Chamurim. There is no base for leniency based on hefsid moment. However, person is entitled to work on the TZOMOS. And if doing his job, he comes to Hulshi Yasir and he doesn't feel well, and it's extreme, nobody is supposed to feel well on a fast day. The reason we fast is because we don't want to feel well. We're not supposed to feel well. These are days of tragedy, they're days of mourning. But if it is something extreme, then sometimes you would have a din of a chayla, and a chayla potam and atzam. A question that I am very commonly asked by doctors and nurses. Doctor needs to do surgery. Well, not even surgery. He's working in the hospital, a nurse. And nurses work very, very hard, especially in Israel. And if they fast, after all, a fast affects your reflexes, your alertness, your cognitive abilities, and it might cause a mistaken judgment. So a doctor or a nurse, in my opinion, does not need to fast. And they can drink lefiat tzorech or even eat as required. If the halacha is that a chayla is potam and atzam, I think the same halacha would apply to those that are treating chayla. Bearing in mind, when a person fasts, he's not as alert, not as keen, not as focused as a person not fasting. And that is biological reality, even if you feel well. It definitely affects your alertness and your ability to respond and have proper judgment. And therefore, I think nurses, doctors, definitely soldiers in active duty, that's my opinion. So we started off today's year with the most fundamental sources, starting from Divrei Neviim, and we got up to some questions halacha l'mais. So bearing in mind that today is the first day of the 3 weeks. Let me share a thought with you. On the very same posuk we started off today's shir. Tzom HaRavi v'Tzom HaChamishi, Tzom HaShvi v'Tzom HaAsiri. Yiyu lebeis Yehuda l'sosen v'lesimchu l'moedim tovim. V'hu emes v'hasholom ahevu. So what's the kesher between the Reisha and the Sefer? Libi Yomali. So the interpretation of this pasuk is twofold, maybe threefold. It's a nevuah. It's a promise. It's a prayer, a tefillah. So the Navi promises it will transpire, it will come to be that these days of tragedy and mourning will be transformed to days of joy, days in which we'll dance and sing. You will ask, when will that be? The Navi says, I can't say when, but I could say how. And it is up to you to determine when. Everybody remembers the Mama Chazal called Dor Shalom Yivna Beis Hamikdash B'Yomav Kilu Charav B'Yomav. No, that is not found anywhere in Chazal. What Chazal actually say is harsher. It's a Yerushalmi, the beginning of Masechet Yuma. Called Dor Shalom Yivna Beis Hamikdash B'Yomav Maran Olav Kilu Hu Echrivo. When we say Ki'ilu Charav B'Yomav, it happened, it transpired, it didn't happen. Somebody bears responsibility. Didn't just transpire, somebody did it. And that somebody is you. Every generation. Kol dor shel haniv beis hamikdash b'yomav ki'ilu hu achivo, because to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, everything is effortless. Nothing is hard on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When we will be fitting, when we will deserve a Beis Hamikdash, we'll have one. And if we don't have one, it means we don't deserve one. And if we don't deserve one, it means if we would have a Beis Hamikdash this morning, it would be destroyed this afternoon. And therefore, Chazal say, Kol dor shel hanivna Beis Hamikdash b'yomav maran olav kilu hu achrivo. So we bear responsibility. So what are we supposed to do? If we destroyed, we're supposed to build. How do we build? Obviously, we need to understand and appreciate what brought about Churma Bayis, and we need to rectify what caused the Churban, and then we'll be Zeicha to the Binyan. So what caused the Churban? In the Doron Payarav, the Gemara speaks about Churban Bayis Rishon, Almo of the Haaretz, Dovazan Shalach HaChomim L'Naviyim V'lo Pirshu Tel HaKodesh Baruch Hu Zalal Ozva Mesteros Yishalei Baruch Hu B'Torah Tchila. And the Ran explains, Lo Yehoisu HaTorah Chashuva Be'eineim V'lo Yasku Barishma. So Churban Bayis Rishon is about Bittul Torah. Churban Bayis Sheni, Yom Edav Tes, Yerushalmi Yom Edav Daled or Rav Hei, Sinas China. So the Navi says, when will it be? Emes v'hasholom ahevu. When you will love emes and cherish sholom. Our Torah is Torah emes. Ein emes elo Torah. Emes ahevu v'hasholom ahevu. And you will rectify what caused Churban Bayis Rishon and what caused Bayis Sheni. It is then that we will be Zeicha. Tzom HaRavi v'Tzom HaChamishi, Tzom HaShvi v'Tzom HaAsiri, Yiyu lebeis Yehuda l'soson u'lesimcha, u'lemoedim tovim b'mehera v'yomeinu amen. Shenizkeh b'korah b'yomeinu. Kol tov, Tzom Kal, Tzom, Meheru yabona beis Hamikdash.